This is a Pasco Media production. Please visit pascomedia.com.
In Latin, Renovo means to renew, restore, or revive. This is the show where we explore the miraculous nature of the mundane as we look at one part of the Catholic tradition to help you engage more fully in the practice of faith. Keyword there being engage. Haha! Past episodes are available at renovopodcast.com. I'm Doug Tuke, and today we look at lapsed Catholics. We look at all of our friends within the faith that have kind of stepped away. And the reason we're doing a show on this is because it is a hot topic. You've heard the old comment, the second largest denomination of Christians is former Catholics. And I don't know, it's not a real funny topic for me. It's more or less kind of a failed aspect of institution and also evangelization. And it's tough. It's tough for me. I have a beautiful family. Many of my aunts and uncles have kind of stepped away from the faith, and some have found beautiful churches and life-giving relationships, and most have not. And so I personally sort of take very seriously the invitation to kind of trudge through who we are as a religious people. I don't have a lot of sympathy for the notion of Christ never intended a religion. If you read any scripture ever, you would kind of quickly realize that's not actually true. Like, he actually really does establish the notion of worship and relationship and community to go with that. So I don't know what your version of religion is. I know what humanity has done with religion, but I can't really say Christ didn't intend for us to gather and worship him. But here's what we're going to do. We're going to dig into the topic because we want to address the amazing amounts of really solid data that's come out in the last couple of years just regarding Catholics and how they've stepped away. So the Center for Applied Research in the Apostolate, if you hear me say CARA, that's what I'm talking about, at Georgetown University, it estimates that there are currently approximately 32 million adults in the United States who were raised Catholic but have ceased to kind of identify themselves as members of the church. So this recent survey basically identifies lapsed and former Catholics all over the country. Now, they focused on the Diocese of Springfield, Illinois, and there was some research going on there at Benedictine University, and there's all this kind of cool, like, new insights into why Catholics stopped attending Mass or really leave the faith altogether. So in their report, it's called Joy and Grievance in an American Diocese. These researchers basically indicate that they targeted those, quote, those who had lapsed or drifted from the church and are currently inactive in a diocesan parish. So the study includes a survey of active Catholics for comparison in terms of kind of the balance. Now, another study, Going, Gone, from St. Mary's Press, is this unprecedented report on why young people are leaving the Catholic Church, based on the comprehensive national study conducted by CARA and St. Mary's Press specifically. So that report specifically, it very uniquely details kind of the many, many reasons for disaffiliation. So you hear that term a lot. You're going to hear disaffiliated by telling young people stories in their own words. It's kind of incredible. So the report, Going, Gone, this goes way beyond the statistical data to just reveal personal narratives. It's storied, and that's the way St. Mary's wants you to understand it. The study surveys and interviewed youth and young adults ages 15 to 25 who once self-identified as Catholic and no longer self-identify as Catholic. The term disaffiliated or religious nons or nuns, N-O-N-E-S, is used in the study pretty regularly. It really reveals that disaffiliation from the church is actually kind of thoughtful. It's a conscious, intentional choice, specifically made by young people in our society, where faith and religious practice are seen as kind of one thing. St. Mary's Press is kind of making the argument that it's a process that unfolds over time, and a lot of disaffiliated youth and young adults they verbally tell you they feel free and relieved when they decide to no longer identify as Catholic. It's a big deal. It affects family dynamics, which frequently play a role in disaffiliation. And a lot of others who disaffiliate kind of perceive that they can be happy and live good moral lives without the burden or the baggage of religious affiliation. So that's That's a big deal. That's language that's kind of hard for believers that practice the faith. And it's okay to clench your fist and get frustrated with that, but it's also imperative that we be listeners of those who disregard the faith, which is a testament to our humanity and how we've served the building of the kingdom. So all these surveys, they didn't use random sampling and fall short of being scientific polls. That's not the case at all. So the authors of these Cara surveys, they say the results may not generalize to all inactive or active Catholics in the diocese. They say the inactive Catholic survey was conducted online with invitations to respond, published in local news media, in advertisements, in church publications, diocesan newspaper, parish bulletins, and the whole thing. So the Springfield study, there was a total of 940 individuals that went on the web. 575 answered questions. The diocese estimated there are 145,000 parish-affiliated Catholics in Springfield where they did this study. So the approach, it yielded a sample that reflects most closely kind of the new, a news-attentive population, like people that are kind of paying attention. So 58% of respondents are around age 50 or older, 39% have attended graduate school or have a graduate degree. Only about 12% of the U.S. population over 25 have a graduate degree. And 65% have attended a mass in the year before being surveyed. This is important stuff to kind of lay out for us so we understand what they were doing. So only 6% of respondents were between the ages of 18 and 24. That was really small. And it's remarkable because the Pew Research Center and Cara surveys of Catholics and former Catholics using random sampling actually indicates that most who leave the faith do so before reaching the age of 18 or between the ages of 18 to 24. So Pew's, called Faith in Flux, their survey, one of the most extensive studies ever conducted about why people leave the faith, they were raised in, specifically estimates that among former Catholics nationally, the Pew Research says only 1/5 who are now unaffiliated, 21%, and 1/3 who are now Protestant, 34%, departed after turning age 24. That is fascinating. So let's talk about the recently fallen away. So Pew, Cara, and other media researchers, they show that news attention among kind of the millennial generation, those born between 1982 and 2002 in the United States, is significantly lower than those of older generations. So few in the millennial generation who have lapsed or left were likely aware of the survey and were very unlikely to respond to a card left in the pew that they haven't been to for years. So it makes sense that there's a huge vacancy there. And if you're not familiar with that data, look into it. The millennial generation, 70+% leaving the church, okay? So even though this Pew's research and Cara's research likely missed the largest segment of the former Catholic population, it's still really useful because it does affect a lot of us who are still practicing and see each other in the pew. So the study, more than any others that I've seen, was able to kind of tap the angry Catholic, and that's a big deal to get kind of a verbal response. So its method of recruiting people that responded really motivated the older, news-attentive former Catholics who are likely the most aware of events kind of going on in the church. Most of the inactive respondents are pretty close to their decision to kind of lapse or leave. 2/3 of them are a member of a parish and or attended mass in the last year. Because this population is way smaller than that of like younger Catholics who just kind of drift away. We don't actually know as much about them from national studies. So Pew's study showed that Catholics who become unaffiliated are most likely to indicate they gradually drifted away from their childhood faith. That was 71% in their findings. Among those becoming Protestants, the most common reasons for leaving were that their spiritual needs were just simply not met in the Catholic Church. 71% responded that way. And they found a religion they liked more. 70%. Now, by comparison, the Springfield study specifically, the survey of inactive Catholics, found 4 major reasons for leaving. This is a big deal, okay? Dissatisfaction with church doctrine, e.g. birth control, ordination of women, civil marriage after divorce, fertility treatments, same-sex marriage, hot topics. Number 2, losing interest in the faith and mass. Number 3, church scandals. And number 4, feeling unwelcome or judged by the church. So that's a big deal. Those are the big dogs. Now, the reasons for leaving obviously are expanded in the study. So let's get into some of the details there. In the survey, respondents were given kind of common reasons for leaving and the church were kind of asked if those were the reasons, if they played a part in their departure. And so the chart kind of shows the percentages of those people who agreed or with the reasons given. So here's the first one. They no longer believe, 48%. Spiritual needs not being met, 67%. Just simply lost interest, 66%. Dissatisfaction with atmosphere, 47%. Too formal, 36%. Too ritualistic, 38%. Music not enjoyable, 36%. And too many money requests, 56%. Interesting. Okay, so the study includes these responses to pretty open-ended questions about kind of decisions to leave. So an example that spans all kinds of different areas of dissatisfaction is, quote, my daughter came out to me as gay, and I went through a divorce after 28 years of marriage. The church doesn't want either one of us. That would be like a response they found. I found that really interesting. 30% of respondents reported that they were uncomfortable with, quote, the feeling of community in their congregation. They were uncomfortable with that. And by comparison, the study survey of like active Catholics actually noted that the sense of community was actually one of the most important reasons for attending Mass at their parish. So the opposite of that was a positive attribute. So this is really consistent with what CARE's, their kind of in-pew surveys nationally. They also found that a sense of welcome and community is the most common thing that attracts and keeps people active in a parish. God forbid we are hospitable, right? So if there's anything that this study and all these other studies of Mass-attending Catholics can teach the church, it's that parish community is the most important element of parish life. That's a big deal. So the contention here is if parishioners don't feel welcome, you can expect to have fewer parishioners very soon, right? Duh. Okay. So anything that's unwelcoming or judgmental is likely to turn people away from your parish and the faith. So the Springfield survey of active Catholics also found that all these respondents, they wanted their priests to be more welcoming and approachable. Those were the two very popular topics. So they felt like these priests personally reaching out to inactive Catholics would likely do the most good. They wanted that personal outreach, okay? The survey does not provide good marks for how the clergy are currently approaching their ministry. It doesn't really evaluate that too much, but the study's author says, quote, parish priest or pastors were the most frequently given responses for what parishioners liked least about their parish. Just sit with that for just a second. So the pastor, their personality, who they are as a person, was the most popular detraction from the faith community. That's incredible. Okay, that's a good place to start a good conversation. Okay, now be careful here. Let's be a little bit solvable in terms of this challenge. There's kind of a final note of caution given by the researchers here. They say respondents may also have included some who have never been Catholic, but who just simply dislike the church. Okay, so there's an active community of these individuals online who can be found in the comment section of any major news story about the church or in like replies to Pope Francis tweets. And invitations to the survey were made in the general news and media. And it wouldn't be hard for us to imagine. There are some who found their way to the survey as a way to protest a church they've never even been a part of. Now, I understand that, okay? But even with few kind of those kinds of challenges, this study, the Springfield study, it's really important. It reflects the raw emotion of older Catholics who have recently stopped attending Mass or left the faith altogether. And friends, you should know that the statistics among baby boomers who have stepped away from the faith is almost as high as millennials, okay? It basically gives us kind of a window into what, like an exit interview, okay, of adult former Catholics, what that might look like. And we often miss this in sample surveys. But the Springfield survey, because it was smaller, it really kind of nailed this, which is pretty cool, okay? Some former Catholics, they left the faith a long time ago, even in their teen years, okay? And they're very distant in emotion from the decision. But the study really kind of confirms that one of the church's biggest problems is something that's totally solvable, okay? It's totally doable. A handshake, a smile, an invitation, hey, I'm really glad you're here. That's way more important than a lot of our pastoral leadership seems to realize. And Pope Francis has shown this. There's a pastoral way to approach church doctrine with Catholics. There's another way that leads to former Catholics. And we have to make a conscious decision in leadership how we join in with folks. Okay. In biblical times, hospitality was far more than just being friendly or polite. It was a duty, and it was an act of mercy, literally. Okay. Hospitality was necessary for survival. Okay. Wrap your mind around that, right? Okay. You traveled in the Holy Land. Traveling there, it was dangerous. It was really dangerous. Cities were far from one another. Places to stay were few and far between, right? People had to travel through deserts, extremely hot temperatures, and lands that were very unfriendly to them because they were ruled by their enemies. Okay, think Good Samaritan, right? People often put their lives in danger on the road, right? And the guy who falls victim to thieves in the parable of the Good Samaritan, right? Luke 10, right? Picture what happened there, the trust that was going on for the strangers around him. So travelers who ran out of food or water or weren't able to find safe shelter during their journeys, they could even run the risk of dying just by walking somewhere, okay? They often had to depend on the hospitality of strangers. We are the body of Christ, okay? That's who we are. That's what we're called to see Christ in the faces of those around us. And Jesus offers us his body and blood in the Eucharist, as he did to his closest disciples at the Last Supper. Guys, Christ, the generous host, okay, invites us to his banquet, literally, all right? He gives himself to us as our bread and wine, our nourishment. We got to receive him. And then we got to be open and welcoming. Our heart needs to be open and welcoming and respond to his generous hospitality by welcoming others in his name. I don't have a lot of patience for the notion of, well, the hell with them. They don't want to be here anyway. Or, well, they never understood what the church was in the first place. Friends, it doesn't work that way. We're not in a recruitment dilemma. We're in a hospitality dilemma. We're in a notion of Christ gave us the church, his bride, and it's laden with humanity. Don't kid yourself, okay? Worked in the church 21 years, worked in a chancery for 10, sticking your head in that rabbit hole and seeing the inside guts of how church works. I have a good sense of it, but I got to be honest with you. I actually don't think this is all that complicated. I don't think it's that complicated to really push ourselves to be welcoming to all who enter our doors, not just those who dress a certain way or behave a certain way or even believe a certain way. There's a certain priest who will remain unnamed. He had no patience for working with any family or any young person that held any contention about pro-choice issues. If they did not embrace the church's unapologetic teaching about being pro-life, he would not welcome them to faith formation or into faith community. Now, here's the thing. I'm a staunch advocate for pro-life, the church's teachings on life. Wouldn't you think the church is the exact place that a person who struggles with that teaching should be? Isn't that the place where we're supposed to model the sanctity of life? Not just preach about the politic of it from the pulpit every Sunday and alienate everyone else who's working for a living and has a mortgage, but actually genuinely create an environment where those spiritual ideals can be talked about and taught, rather than alienating someone because of their ideals. That modus of leadership in the church will kill the church. It will kill churches. It will never kill the bride. The bride's the bride. The bride's going to survive no matter what. This is Christ we're talking about. But my goodness gracious, many a hotel is empty that does not serve its guests, okay? Many a hospice is closed that does not serve the pilgrim. That's the humanity of what we're doing. Christ is Christ. But who we are as pastoral leaders, we have to be loving. We have to literally love our enemies. They'll know us by our love. There's nothing easy about that. But to crawl inside of ourselves, to lock our doors, to treat families with crying babies as aliens and unwelcome in worship is diabolical. It's not just like, wow, that sure is a poor led parish. No, that's evil, dividing what the faith community was designed to do in the first place. Lapsed Catholics are our brothers and sisters. It's our failure as practicing Catholics to be hospitable and welcome to the point of sacrifice. Love, love, love. It's the only way that tide will ever turn. Ever. All right? Bit of a dark topic today on Renovo, but I tell you what, I hope it stimulates some conversation. I look forward to the emails. For crying out loud. We'll see how that goes. Don't forget to visit renovopodcast.com for past episodes. Please subscribe to, review, and rate our podcast. We always appreciate your input. Your topic suggestions, questions, and or comments are always welcome at doug@renovopodcast.com. Learn more about me on Twitter and Instagram at DTOOKE and the number 1. Always remember to engage the tradition, a tradition of hospitality, and live the conversion. Until next time, God bless.